welcome everybody to another episode of Video Mojo. We've been doing all the stuff behind the scenes to be live on Facebook Live and live on YouTube at the same time. My name is John Leland, and I'm a digital marketing strategist, and this is the playful exploration of digital engagement and video presence. We like to say that we're helping people to have a more vibrant video presence and a more engaging social media presence. And I'm really excited to have a new episode here for you. We've got this four-part harmony or four-course menu for you. I tee it up with an opening commentary. I'm delighted to have my friend and author, coach Christy Strauch with us, and we're going to talk about creatives and resistance and getting your work out. We've got some really kind of, I think, profound and important things to talk about that will be useful to anybody who's doing almost anything creatively. And then we open it up with the community campfire, which is Q&A, ask us anything. We want your comments, whether you're watching on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live. Being here is your opportunity to participate, and we really want that. And then I've got some Luscious links, something that Christy and I have in common, and I'm going low tech, high touch today. And I think that actually it's one of the most important things to me that's made the biggest difference in my life. And I'll be covering that during Luscious Links. The commentary that I want to make today and tee it up really has to do with the stories that we're telling ourselves. And that's been a recurring theme, as you may know, here on Video Mojo, how we talk to ourselves, what the inner conversations are that affect how we perform and the results that we produce. And it's interesting because there's always multiple stories going on. As Michael Cass says, and Michael will be back to do the third pillar of a vibrant video presence next Friday live at 10 a.m. Pacific. Michael talks about three kinds of stories: the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell other people, which are not always congruent with each other, and then all of the cultural stories that we live within. And looking at Video Mojo, looking at social media, I'm reminded of kind of both the dark side and the light side which coexist. It's easy for the dark side to dominate. And I still am recommending to everybody who hasn't seen it the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, which is very much about the dark side. But I live mostly in the social media promise of the democratization of media, of this amazing fun playground that Video Mojo is, and video streaming is, and social video is. I think it's a new opportunity, as Julia McNeil pointed out in last week's episode, for us to connect with our shared humanity through authentic stories. So I'm staying with that side of the, that side of the story spectrum at the moment, but I know both are true. And so being aware of all of these stories is really how we build awareness and consciousness, more successful, meaningful presence, meaningful media, and that's kind of what Video Mojo is all about. So that's my commentary for today, and we'll move into our collaborative conversation. I am really delighted to have Christy here. She is an author of 3 books. The one I originally met her when she was doing her business planning book called Passion Plan Profit. She has a new book coming out later this year called Artists Don't Starve. And it's all about creatives and not starving, having a vibrant, meaningful income from your creativity. We also share in common that she's an ukulele player, an aspiring cartoonist, as I kind of am in the background, and she loves to travel, focusing currently on destinations that can be reached by car. So welcome, Christy.
Hi, John.
How are you? It's so great to be with you.
Yes.
I'm in the Bay Area, Christy's in Arizona. And, when we talk about creatives, resistance, and getting your work out, maybe you can start by introducing the book and, what is it that makes artists starve, whether they're artists doing fine art or creative people like you and me who like doing social media and perhaps social video.
It actually starts with one word, and the word's trauma. The thing that makes it so difficult for creative people to get their work into the world is that they, or we, including you and me, have experienced a lot of trauma around what people's response is to our work. And it starts when you're a kid, and not to create this whole victim idea necessarily, but it's just when you're doing work, when I'm doing work that comes from my heart that I care so much about, it's so sensitive. And when I put it out there, and especially when we do it when we're younger, we start when we're younger, when it's not received with open arms, or, the teacher says that I still have this resentment from 4th grade that the centers of the flowers are not supposed to be purple, they're yellow. That you start getting this feedback that what you're doing is wrong, or it's not good, or it's not the right thing, it's not good enough. And enough of that builds up to the point where there's a part of us that decides, hey, putting our work out into the world is just too dangerous. And it shows up in all kinds of different ways, like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I just can't get to my marketing, or my desk is so cluttered. Luckily, you can't see my desk, but there's all kinds of ways that these parts of ourselves conspire in a good way to keep us safe by making it so we don't put our work into the world.
So you think everybody has some form of that, eh? I mean, it's not just kind of like, because I think some people think only some people have trauma, and really you're kind of saying anybody that's trying to put themselves out there is dealing with some kind of trauma and some kind of the resistance is historical. I mean, I know from my own kind of excavations and digging, I go back to a scene in high school where I was compared unfavorably to my older brother, and it just it took a lot of work. So this is not easy stuff you're talking about. This is not a quick fix. This is not, so how would you describe the process that one goes through to get liberated creatively and be willing to put oneself out there and get the work out and take the risks?
It starts by listening to the voice. This is the opposite of what a psychologist would say, probably. It starts by listening to the voices in our heads. I
think that's true.
Everybody's got, well, I know it's crazy, but everybody has an inner critic. And you can start by listening to the inner critic, and not necessarily to how critical it is, but thinking about the inner critic as an ally who has my best interests at heart, but a really old strategy that it's using. The best way to get somebody to not do something is to criticize them. And if my inner critic, deep down inside is trying to keep me safe from more trauma, more outside feedback that we're not as good as our older brothers, or, the writing doesn't look good, or whatever the criticism is, the inner critic is really good at it's like a world-class ability to stop us from putting our stuff out in the world. So you can start there by talking to your inner critic and ask this first question, which is, what are you protecting me from?
So you're having a conversation with the inner critic. I think that's a bit of a leap for some people, that you can actually talk to your inner critic.
Well, right, because we've been taught to beat on our inner critics and do the affirmations in the mirror and tell the inner critic to go F itself and, go away and all that stuff. The stuff, what I'm, that thing, it rhymes, what I resist persists. And it's actually turning and talking to the inner critic can be super productive. Especially if you start out by the way you'd start out by talking to a human being that you wanted to have a relationship with, not by starting out and saying, I hate you and you're ruining my life. Yeah. It's more like, starting out by saying, what do you want for me? What is your deepest desire for me? And when I've done that, because I have a pretty loud inner critic, and I'm guessing you might have one too, once it diffuses the whole conversation. I'm not trying to kill you, I'm trying to understand you. And once I start trying to understand my inner critic, the thing it wants most for me is safety. And the safest thing it thinks, from age 6, when it made this decision, is to not not be visible, not show myself.
This is also what gets frequently referred to as imposter syndrome too, right? It's a similar thing
Yes.
to inner critic, yeah. And
Yes, the imposter
I'm
syndrome.
holding myself back from getting ahead of myself with the Luscious links because I want to talk about morning pages, and I know you're a big fan. In fact, you shared with me before we started the webcast that you've been doing it for over 20 years. I've been doing it for consistently, I think now 4.5 or 5 months, and it's a life changer, and it also is very relevant to what we're talking about here. I'm going to throw another Luscious link in at random. I was going to talk with you about it earlier, which is this book by Stephen Pressfield called The War
Oh,
of Art,
the
which
war of art.
it's one of the best books ever written. If you haven't read it and you're interested at all in breaking through creatively and breaking through with resistance in particular, can't recommend it more highly. But maybe is Morning Pages your best tool, or what tools do you recommend, and what else is in the book to help people get into the dialogue with the inner critic, or whatever we want to call that, and the other voices, right? This
Hmm.
plays right along with the stories we tell ourselves,
Yes.
and the
So
stories we tell others, which may or may not be real.
yeah, well, mostly they're real in a parallel universe. What I use morning pages to a lot to have conversations with the parts of myself. So I will actually ask, I put a little C for Christy with a colon. May I speak to the part of myself that is worried about, right now actually, worried about finishing the book, Artists Don't Starve.
Hmm.
I got it back from the editor a couple days ago and she has some suggestions. And my first response is, can I please hide under my desk until this goes away? So instead of doing that, I want to talk to the part of myself that knows, well, A, that's afraid to write more on the book. What are you afraid of? What are you protecting me from? How can I honor you? It's so counterintuitive to think about talking to a part of me that's holding me back and asking that part, how can I honor you? How can I bring you into my life? What is it that you are trying to, I already said this, but what you're trying to keep me safe from? What are you trying to protect me from? So I do that in morning pages every morning because I've always got a part. I wake up, don't tell anybody on Facebook. I wake up afraid a lot. And I want to talk to the part that wants to hide under the desk and find out what's going on. What's scaring you today? How can I help you? How can I support you? And it's those parts seem to have two things going on. They have this deeper purpose and they have an outdated strategy. So the deeper purpose is for me to be safe, for me to be connected, to be in relationship with people. But the strategy a lot of times involves hiding, almost always.
And I think that it's really, I think for some people probably a revelation that they can have these kind of conversations within themselves. And I use it also as a spiritual tool. I
Oh,
ask for spiritual guidance directly.
yes.
And it's one that, in my own life, I don't do that often. But when I'm writing morning pages, I am more open to doing it. And also, it really is a playground for interacting with my intuition. And that's a
Yep.
big important thing for me, that I want God involved. I want
Yes.
this grace that's always present to be partner. I want to partner with that.
I
So,
usually start that with my morning pages. I ask, so I call that intuition, I call it guidance. So I always ask guidance, what do you want me to know today? What do you want me to be today? What do you want me to do today? And I always get an answer. And if it says I want you to go to the nearest lake and jump in, I know that's not the voice of guidance, but I always, almost always, every day ask for guidance from that part of myself that knows what the next right thing is.
gorgeous. All
Yeah,
right. So
it's fun.
I want to open up the lines, so to speak. Although, as usual, we're with a intimate small audience. But I always include community campfire as part of what we're doing here. We love your interactions, and we love hearing from you, your questions, comments, participation, whatever. And I love getting them up on the screen too when they come from the other platforms. Vince asked, "How do you find your inner critic?" So somebody that
Oh,
isn't used to that, you've come across that before in your work?
no. And it's a good question. I've never found anybody who doesn't have an inner critic. The way you find your inner critic is just ask, may I speak to my inner critic? And 9,000 times out of 9,000 times, it will show up when you ask. I've never had it not show up. It's would be one of the things that might be happening. I mean, maybe people will think this is completely crazy, but maybe the inner critic doesn't like to be called an inner critic. It might like to be called your traffic cop or your, who knows? Because inner critic is a pejorative in a way. I mean, nobody wants to be called an inner critic or any kind of critic.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to even branch that question out farther. People say, "What do you mean? I have all these voices. How do I have parts of myself that I can talk to?" And I always use this example of, have you ever said to yourself, one part of me wants to go to the gym and the other part wants to sit on a couch and watch Netflix? And almost everybody realizes, oh yeah, I totally have those two parts. And then you can just go from there. That there's lots of other, so we've got lots of contradictory parts. I think they're all pulling in this, well, they're all trying to pull in the same direction to help us, but they all have lots of them have different strategies that contradict each other.
So is there a relationship between self-esteem and this parts work, or the conversation with the inner critic? In other words, I've found that I definitely tend to put myself down and feel like I'm not doing enough and all that. And when I let that voice be quieter, I actually can just sort of do the work and stay in the flow.
What happens for me is when I'm talking to the inner critic and I get down underneath its fear of me being visible and it, being mean to try and keep me safe and invisible, it stops being so critical. And the an intended consequence then is I do feel better about myself, that I don't have that voice as much that's so, like, what are you doing? What do you think all that. Who do you think you are? What are you doing? When I approach that voice like it's trying to help me, it just doesn't know how, it totally shifts the feeling of who I am and my worth as a human being. And it's a way to, I mean, I don't want my inner critic to feel like I'm trying to kill it, because I don't most of the time want to. But it's like having a kid, a 5-year-old who's screaming, and I know you know all about this. You don't, well, you don't whack the 5-year-old. They need something that's important. They just don't have they don't have enough experience or the strategies to ask for what they want in a way that an adult maybe would like to hear.
Yeah. The other piece of it that I would love you to talk about is kind of the element of it as a practice. And I've done that particularly when Video Mojo was just a video blog, talking about my own willingness to do this as experiment, to, as my friend Neil Rogan says, make mistakes in the direction of my intention. So there's a risk involved, and I'm putting myself out. But I find the more that I put myself out, I get better at that skill and recognize it's way more fun to do it than not do it, no matter what. No matter if there's nobody watching, no matter if I'm not making any money with it. I mean, it's like I'm not doing this to make money. This is fun for me. So talk about it as a practice. Like we said before, it's not a quick fix. There's no instant, oh, I got an inner critic, now I'm done.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. The thing that's we have that. I think this universal thing of, oh, especially when you're starting out. Oh, I need to do my morning pages. Oh, I don't want to do my morning pages. I'm too busy to do my morning pages. So when I am like that, which happens, I start my morning pages by talking to the part of me that doesn't want to do them. And that gets me into the flow, because you're talking about that beneficial cycle of once I do it, then I do it again because I'm starting to get the positive response or the positive results from it. And when I don't want to do it, and all the rationalization in the world is, it's good, but it doesn't necessarily make me sit down and do my morning pages. Although at this point, I've got such a long habit. It's like I'm missing an arm if I don't do my morning pages. But if I don't feel like it, I sit down and talk to the part that doesn't want to and see what knowledge it has for me. Not to beat it up, but to find out, okay, what is it? What do you need? What do you need me to know? And that once I get the paper and the pen going, I'm golden.
Yeah, and it's so valuable. I'm going to talk more about that, but so thank you again so much for being here and for your valuable, wise counsel as always. We're looking forward to Artists Don't Starve. It's Artists
Yes.
Don't Starve. If they want
Yes.
to work with you, you're a coach as well as an author. ChristyStrauch.com, is that the best way to find you? And it's Strauch.
Yes, sir.
ChristyStrauch.com, and she's an awesome human being and a great supporter and a wonderful friend. And we're going to be talking more about ukulele and cartooning. And who knows, that could come back into all of this. But thanks again, Christy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. This was fun.
Yeah, it is. Thanks. So, Luscious Links is the next segment that we have here in the four-course meal. And as I said, I want to talk about morning pages, and I'm going to tell you a little story. I got involved because I listened to this interview. Tim Ferriss's podcast is one of my favorites, and Elizabeth Gilbert's is also one of my most favorite inspirational people. And in this interview, which I highly recommend, um, is a moment when they talk about morning pages and the value of morning pages. And Elizabeth Gilbert not only said, I think I'm going to do it like another 12-week commitment, because the artist way is a 12-week commitment, which, as with Christy and with me, we've just kept going. But Elizabeth Gilbert said, I would not have written Eat, Pray, Love if it was not for doing morning pages. So the morning pages come out of one of the many books written by Julia Cameron, in particular, The Artist's Way. And I'm going to put all these links into the show notes or the posts or whatever. Um, but I found actually in doing research for this episode that she's done this little, I think it's about a 3-minute video explaining the practice of morning pages. So you don't have to read the book. You can just go and listen to her talk about it. It's not complicated. Although what I will say is that it's something that you want to do by hand. She recommends it by hand. I've been doing them in spiral notebooks. And the point is to do 3 pages every day, talk with whatever part of yourself, with your higher power, with what's going on in your life. It doesn't really matter what you write about. But the thing that I will say for myself is that in doing it every day, I've found that I'm going deeper and giving myself this valuable time for reflection. And I want to kind of slow down on that because I think that way too many of us don't take time to reflect and think about what's going on. The other thing I would say is that by doing that time, giving myself the creative space to write the morning pages, I have ideas. It's like brainstorming with yourself. And I'm amazed at the stuff that comes out. I'm amazed with kind of the alignment with the flow and reaffirming that I'm someone who loves to align with the flow and all that spiritual stuff we were talking about before. So it's a practice. Make a minimum of a 12-week commitment. I felt very blessed when I heard that recommendation from Tim Ferriss and Elizabeth Gilbert. I sort of decided to do it. Another guest, Sean Shepard, decided to do it too. My girlfriend decided to do it too. And so we all started. And it was nice to have the support. But I've just kind of locked in. And every morning I get up, I make coffee, do what I have to do in the bathroom, and I write my morning pages. It's the first thing I do because that way it happens. And I've been getting up earlier than usual to include it, and I just can't recommend it more highly. So that's the thing. So continuing on with Video Mojo, I get myself back here, but I love the way that my friends and colleagues and people that I really care about, like Christy, have shown up to be part of it. Michael Cass, my good friend who I mentioned before, was an expert in story. We've almost got like a mini course we've done. So we've done the first two pillars of a vibrant video presence, and we're going to be talking next week about story. The week after that, on October 23rd, my really good friend and the amazing master coach and multiple book author Andrea J. Lee is going to be here. And after that, Sean Shepard, who's a really fun executive coach, keynote speaker, relationship builder, sales coach. He does all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I'm really excited by what great people I get to talk to. And I also wanted to let you know that I've got a new link page up. So instead of sending you to the blog, I'm now sending you to the link page that we've just built. This is actually a new feature in ConvertKit. So you can subscribe and get announcements about who's going to be on. Got a free webinar that you can watch without registering. If you want to do the blog or you want to subscribe, Facebook, YouTube Live. We are a podcast as well. So that's the show for this week. I can come back to the DSLR and say, thank you so much for being here. I love that you participate and thank you for watching. And we'll be back again next Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern with another edition of Video Mojo Live. I hope you'll join us and ask questions and participate. And thanks again for watching. See you next week.